Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'm Nicole and I'm an alcoholic. I was gonna start by reading the daily reflection because it really spoke to me today. So this is the AA daily reflection for April 12th. Giving up insanity. Where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. Alcoholism required me to drink whether I wanted to or not. Insanity dominated my life and was the essence of my disease. It robbed me of the freedom of choice over drinking, and therefore robbed me of all other choices. When I drank, I was unable to make effective choices in any part of my life, and life became unmanageable. I asked God to help me understand and accept the full meaning of the disease of alcoholism. So when I read that today, that's like, that's it. That was it. I lost the ability to make choices a long time ago. So I'll kind of start at the beginning. Um, I was raised in a family with, two parents and a sister, raised Catholic, went to Catholic school. Um, and from the outside, our family looked pretty good. My two parents that, had good jobs. And like I said, we were in private Catholic school. And inside my home was pure chaos. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother was the one that tried to make everything look perfect. And so that was what I learned to do. Um, and I got both of it, right? So I got the alcoholism from my dad and the perfectionism to make everything look pretty from the outside from my mom. I always was a heavy drinker from the very first time I drank. I drank at a Christmas party when I was like 13, completely blackout first time. And I remember, I don't know when the next time I got to drink was, but I know that I was looking forward to it, and the same thing happened, blackout every time. And I looked forward to that Christmas party. Like as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, next year we're gonna have the same party. Um, and even though I was sick and I didn't feel good, it didn't matter. I loved how I felt when I was doing it. Um, in high school, every weekend was, finding a party, making bad decisions. My parents thought I was a really good kid because I never got caught. I always had good cover stories, and yeah, I was able to just party and do what I wanted because I had good grades and my parents didn't worry about me. When they had found me drinking, they just like took me home, put me to bed, and then we never talked about it again. Which is so strange to me now when I reflect back upon it, because I think I would just be so different with my own kids. But anyways, that's how it was handled. Um, Also, I grew up in a body that was different than my friends. I didn't look like them. I developed really early. So in like fourth grade, I looked more like I should be in high school. Except that I was, short, but I had, a full chest in fourth grade. And that caught the attention of men because I didn't look like I was, 12. I looked like I was, 16, 18. And that caused, men to be inappropriate with me at a really young age, but it made me feel good, right? Being around my friends, I felt, like I was fat, or, I felt awkward because I didn't look like them. And then I would get this attention, which made me feel good. Then you add a little alcohol on that. You add some more bad decisions, and that took me outside of myself, and I didn't have to think about what was going on at home or those insecure feelings. So that would be what I would run with. um so graduated high school just fine, no problems there. Was sort of in college, but partying was a lot more important to me. I had an older boyfriend, and so doing other things was more important than studying in school. I met my first husband when I was 23, and 2 months later, I was pregnant with Jack. So that kind of changed my life drastically, right? For about 9 months. And I wouldn't change it. Obviously, I love being a mom. Um, and I did take a step back a little bit, raising him was wonderful, but I was alone a lot. Um, and, my life was all right for a handful of years there. The twins were born 4 years later, 4.5 years later, and things were pretty good. Um, and I still drank heavy, but I was a little more stable, in a really stable marriage and raising these kids. And I went to work every day, and then on the weekends I would really tie it on. I mean, I definitely drank during the week, but the weekends was, definitely bad decisions were made. That awful feeling when you wake up in the morning and you're like taking the temperature of my husband, like, what did I do last night? Did I do anything stupid? Did I say anything stupid? Because often, especially when we were out, I would always do something stupid. um but things were all right for a handful of years. After the twins were born, we kind of put that picture even more together because we did everything out of order, right? I got pregnant, and then we got married, and then we had some more kids, and then we bought a house. And on paper, everything was perfect. If I had to write the book of what I wanted, it was all there. We had a beautiful home. Our kids were in private Catholic school. I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband had a good job. I had a little farm up in Placerville, and everything looked really good. And inside, I was just completely miserable. Um, and my alcoholism just slowly started to ramp up. And I can now reflect back on it and see that, I intentionally tanked my marriage, trying to like feel something different. Like he wasn't making me happy. So I needed to do something about that. Um, and so I would go on to, cheat on my husband, blow up my marriage, and I knew that it was him. It was his fault. And I would go on for the next several years trying to make the next person fit into our lives. And I would repeat that cycle over and over and over again. Um, and every time a relationship failed, I just sunk deeper and deeper into my alcoholism. um, get to COVID, and I could not handle the isolation. I was used to spending, 3 or 4 nights a week at my mom's house having dinner. My grandmother had moved in with them about a year before COVID, and it just like all stopped. I couldn't go anywhere, and that isolation brought me to working from home as well. And that's when it really got bad. That's when I could literally drink all day. In 2020 in the summer, I got a DUI, and that was really scary. I got, in a car accident with all my kids in the car. Went to jail, and that was not enough to wake me up. That wasn't enough. That was not my rock bottom, not even close. It was just kind of like something I was like, "Ooh, I definitely don't want to think about that." So, on came more alcohol. Then I would meet Steven at the end of 2020, and he's such a wonderful, like, unlike anybody I'd ever been with. Wonderful, sweet, good with his kids, got everything together. And here comes me, this drunk hot mess. But for whatever reason, he loved me. And we would merge our lives really quickly, probably much more quickly than we should have. But in my active addiction, that seemed like a good idea. Um, and once we were all living together, my behavior became really unacceptable really quick. And so I committed to quit drinking. And when I said I would quit drinking, that meant, okay, now I was going to hide it because I wasn't ready to quit drinking. But I was trying, but the more I tried to try and the more I hid it, the worse it got. I was drinking more than I was when I was openly drinking. It was a sick game, of like trying to get enough in while I was home alone, and then I'd end up drunk, well before I wanted to. Whereas when I was openly drinking, I could just kind of maintain all day. I ended up losing my job, not necessarily because of drinking. They didn't fire me because I was drinking. They were firing me because I was doing a shitty job, and that's because I was drinking all day, every day. And so then I would go on this period of like a year and a half where I didn't work. Um, and in, I guess, right before the holidays in 2021, Stephen was pretty much done. He pretty much had it. Too many things had happened. I wasn't a functioning person. And so I came up with the idea to go to rehab. And I told everybody I was going to go to rehab. I was going to get better. I was committed. I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to quit drinking. I know now that I was still in the want to stop phase. I wasn't really ready, but I went. And I went in November. I think Thanksgiving was my first day sober because they told me I had to be 3 days sober to go to rehab, which I now know isn't true. I guess you can show up to rehab completely messed up. I didn't know that. They told me that I couldn't, so I didn't. And those 3 days were miserable. Thanksgiving, oh my God, was so miserable. Um, and I went off to rehab, and it was like a women's place, and it was, state run, and it was an icky place. There was a lot of different kinds of people that I had never been exposed to before. And but I was, learning. I was doing their classes, and I really quickly learned there that if I was going to quit drinking, it had to be forever. And I really thought I could go there and like hit the reset button, like get a year of sobriety, and then I'd be fine. Then I'd be able to go back to like having a glass of wine. When I say that out loud, it sounds so stupid because having a glass of wine was never something I did. Even now, it doesn't sound like a good idea because a glass of wine doesn't get me to where I want to be. I drink for the effects of the alcohol. I've never enjoyed a drink in my life. Talk about 5 or 6, then I'm feeling good. Then I'm having a good time. That's where I want to be. Um, so I don't know, I guess that's the insanity, right? I had lost the choice to drink. Even when I didn't want to drink, I was drinking. Um, but so anyways, I went just after Thanksgiving, so I was supposed to be there 30 days, which would have put me past Christmas and into New Year's. Well, I got the idea that my family would really want me to be home for Christmas. So one morning, after like the night before, I had gotten in trouble for not unloading the dishwasher or something. And so the next morning, I was like, they were going to take away my phone privileges. So I said, no, that's it. I'm going home. I'm going to spend Christmas with my kids. Everyone's going to be so happy that I'm home and I'm better. And I'm this new version of myself, 26 days sober. And I got home and nobody was happy to see me. They all saw, I mean, I guess my kids were happy to see me. Um, but no, everybody saw something that I didn't see, which was if I couldn't even commit to 30 days of rehab, how was I going to make it? My sister, who had been really supportive of me going to treatment, again, was not talking to me. And she hadn't talked to me for about 3 years before that. So that felt really low. That felt awful. Um, and I signed up for the IOP classes and was doing those, a couple days a week. I don't even remember. I think it was like 3 days a week for like 2 hours on Zoom. I made it all the way till January 10th, which was 47 days before I drank. And basically with no program. I would every once in a while pop into an AA meeting on Zoom. Um, but it was just that one foot in the door. I wasn't committed. I knew I had a problem. That wasn't an issue. I knew my life was unmanageable. That wasn't something that I battled with. I just wasn't ready to quit drinking. I wasn't ready to let go of my like best friend, my companion. And so I started drinking. And I did that IOP class till like May, drinking the whole time, like while we were in class. Um, and I would go on the pattern of moving out of the house, into the house, out of the house, into the house. I think I did it 3 times. Um, and then we kind of had like I don't know, I had been out for like 2 solid weeks and we hadn't really talked. And then he was begging me to come back. And I was committing to not drinking. And managed to get 20 days when I came home. And I don't know, I was feeling so great. And he went off to work on a Monday. And, that harebrained idea came in, I should go get a bottle. And it was not even a conscious thought. It was just like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And so I went and I did it. Now when those thoughts come up, obviously it's a lot different. But then, without program, that came in my head. Okay, let's do it. Instant gratification. I got the smaller bottle, the size, and I was only going to drink half of it because then, I would be fine. And I drank the whole thing, of course, because that's what alcoholics do. And Stephen came home that night. He just took one look at me, and he didn't say a word, just the look on his face. I knew that he had it. He was done. He couldn't do it anymore. He wanted to get out of this race. And he went to a meeting that I was supposed to go to for softball. I was going to be like the softball manager for my stepdaughter's team, which obviously I couldn't go to that meeting completely plastered. So he went in my place, and I knew that he was going to come home and tell me to leave and that it was over. And I couldn't handle that thought. My kids already hadn't been staying with me for several months at that point. Chris, my ex-husband, had finally, decided that they shouldn't be staying with me. So I would see them, on the weekends, like at my mom's, but they weren't staying with me. And even that wasn't enough to like shake me, right? So I took a bottle of pills that night and tried to kill myself. As the medication started making me loopy, I started texting people. I was drunk and I had all this medication on board, and was texting people that I loved them, that I cared about them, that I was sorry. They all started talking, and people started showing up at my house. They called the paramedics. Paramedics came, and I like snapped into consciousness. Like I could answer every question that they had. And, they're asking me things like, who's the president? What day of the week is it? What year is it? What's your name? What's your address? And I could answer all their questions. And I remember the paramedic looking at my mom and saying, there's nothing that I can do. We can't take her. She won't admit that she did anything, and she can answer all of our questions with clarity. And I just remember the look on my mom's face. She was so scared. And Stephen came home after the paramedics left, and he just looked at my mom and said, I don't want her here. My mom would take me in the car, and I would start to seize. I was starting to have seizures and throwing up. And so they took me to the hospital. I spent like 5 or 6 days in the hospital. A lot of complications from the medication that I had taken. And I think I had about 35 seizures, they told me, over the course of a couple of days. And it took a couple of days for that fog to lift. And I remember my mom sitting by my bed, and the room was really sunny. It was like really bright in the room. And she said, I think you need to go back to treatment. And I said, I'm not going back to that place. It didn't help me. I'm nothing like those people. Those were drug addicts. And I'm an alcoholic, and I'm not going back there. And she said, well, I found another place for you. And it's what they call dual diagnosis. They have therapists, and they can, try and help you figure out why you're like this. And I was like, okay. So I got out of the hospital, and I got on board. I was ready to go, because what other choice did I have? I was now at the point where the choice was to die or to actually give it a shot and try and get better. And I knew now that my old ways weren't going to work anymore, right? All of my cards had been pulled, and there was nothing left. I was either going to not drink, or nobody was going to be there for me. So I went to this place called Olympia House, and it was the most beautiful treatment center. It was up on a hill on like a 150-acre dairy farm. And from day one, when I got there, I was ready. I don't know if I mean, I would call it a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience in that hospital room, where I was like, okay, like I'm gonna give myself a shot. And I had been listening to the Friend of Jerry podcast for several months at that point, and I would watch it and I would cry, because like I wanted to want that, but I wasn't there yet. I would watch it drinking, because I would watch it on YouTube on the TV. And so anyways, that very first Monday, which is when the podcast used to drop, um, I had my cell phone while I was there, different kind of treatment center, and put the podcast on. And that very first Monday, Jerry said he was going to start the Tuesday meeting, and it would have been the next day. So that very first week in treatment. And I got on that meeting and something just changed. It felt different this time. I felt connected to every person that shared in that room. Whereas before I would sit there and, look at the differences. Like that's never happened to me. Like I've never done that. But I heard the similarities for the first time. And I really poured myself into treatment. I went to every class offered. I did yoga. I ran the whole time I was there, but I was 100% committed. I think like maybe the second week or something, one of the head counselors there, like she was the director of the program. She was running a group and she asked us some question. I don't remember what the question was, and I answered. Everybody in the room answered, and she just looked at me and she goes, "You're so full of shit." She goes, "Your personality is complete bullshit." And I just looked at her like, "I don't know what you're talking about." She's like, "You are not this happy person." And I was like, "Yeah, I am. I've always been like this." And she's like, "No, you're not." And I remember like stomping up to the office after class going, "I'm not going to any more of her classes." Like she was rude to me and she called my personality bullshit. And it took about 2 days for it to sink in that she was right. Because like I was portraying this person that I wasn't, the person that I wanted to be, but I was broken inside. There was nothing inside me that felt good. I could laugh and joke and, cut it up with people, but that's not really how I felt. That was all a front. And so that really broke me down. And, they break you down to build you up, right? And it certainly did that. So I left treatment and I knew I wasn't ready to go home. And I didn't want to go live with my mom. And I thought the best choice for me would be sober living. So I said I would go to sober living for 90 days. And kind of like in my mind, I was like, okay, this will help solidify my program. So you got to go to so many meetings a week. And, to live in the felt, everybody had told me good things about it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. And it was the like one of the best gifts I ever gave myself. It was hard, but it was also wonderful. Living with people that are all working a program, that are all in the steps, that all have sponsors. It's just such a unique experience. And yeah, there were chores and like you had to get your meeting card signed. And so there was like some stuff to it that wasn't always pleasant. I had a curfew at 38 years old. I had to be in the house by midnight. Um, and but I enjoyed it. I really did. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I really made sure that I was working my program, and I wanted to get through those steps while I lived there. And I had a sponsor, and I saw her a couple times a week, and she would come to me, and I had to get real humble and ask people to take me to meetings. That was something new for me, like ask for help. Like I'm the person that helps people. So anyways, it was a very humbling experience for me. I went and walked across the street to the grocery store and got myself a little job, bagging groceries. And because that's all I felt like I could really handle at that time. Recovery had to come first. And I worked at that grocery store for 6 months. Anyhow, 90 days came and went. And Stephen was starting to ask me, like, when are we going to go back to normal? And I didn't know the answer, and I knew I wasn't ready to leave. I would spend one weekend here at home with Steven, and then the other weekend, the opposite weekend, at my mom's house with my kids. And it was really hard. It was really hard to be separated from everybody. But it was really what like for the kind of addict that I was, it was necessary to like have a drastic change. Finally at 6 months, I was spending more time at home than I was at sober living. And so I thought that it was probably time to make my amends to Stephen and see if if he wanted me home. So I made my amends and we decided I would come home. And that was February 1st of 2023, is when I came home. And I was like all ready. Like I, called Chris, told him I was moving home and I was ready to have the kids back. And he was like, no. And I was like, but I'm sick, at the time, 7 months sober. Like I'm ready. And he's like, No, maybe in April. I was like in April. So I was April would come and go, and I still didn't have the kids. I would see them, same thing. I would go up to my mom's every other weekend and spend every other weekend with them. And then, of course, I was home here. I got another job. I got a job close to home, another big girl job back in the corporate world. And so I was making decent money and I was doing all the things. Still hadn't started my DUI classes, still hadn't started my parenting class, all the things that I needed to do to clean up my mess from the past. Procrastination, that's a real bitch, that character defect. All of my procrastination comes from fear, fear of the unknown, fear of, not being able to do it, or it just fear. Um, so finally in June, I decided to like start to get my shit together. So I got, um, well, the state of California helped me do that actually. They sent me a letter saying that I hadn't done my parenting class and they were going to revoke my plea deal if I didn't get my stuff done. So I enrolled in the parenting class and got that started in June. And then I talked to a lawyer about, because Chris and I never went to court. He never took me to court to take away the kids formally. On paper, I still had legal 50-50 custody. And he said, well, if he won't give you the kids and you don't have a change of custody agreement, then you need to file a contempt of court and take him to court. And that tore me apart. Like, here's, a man that I used to love, that I have 3 children with, who was taking care of my kids for a year at that point, more than a year, a little more than a year. Um, and in order to get them back, I was going to have to take them to court. That just felt so icky. And, talked to my sponsor about it at the time, and I prayed like crazy about it. And I had all the paperwork printed out. That was like step one, was to print out all the paperwork. Um, and then I called the kids one Saturday and I was talking to my youngest son, John, and he said, hey, Mama, I want to tell you something. And I said, what, John? And he said, I overheard Brooke and Daddy talking, and they were talking to somebody else, and they said that if you asked for us to come over, he can't say no. I think he had caught wind that I would file contempt of court. I think maybe my sister blew that cover. I don't know. I don't care, because I texted him right after that and I said, I'd like to have the kids next weekend. And he said, okay, what time? And it just went from there. So right from then, I started having the kids every weekend, and that has been such a blessing. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me back up to sobriety. Living in sober living was absolutely necessary for me to stay in recovery. When I had my one foot in the door, it wasn't enough. I had to do all the things. I had to get a sponsor, I had to work the steps, and be of service. I had to do all 3 of those things. And it wasn't until I closed that door behind me and fully got in the room that I was going to get it. Um, today, today I have 21 months sober. I've got several sponsees, probably more than I can handle some days. um, I've got a sponsor who's absolutely wonderful. I go to meetings. I, host the Friend of Jerry meeting. I think I've been doing that since like November of 2022, so well over a year. Um, and being of service in that way, feeling like I was making a difference and being a part of it, gave me purpose. Like people counted on me to show up and to be there for them. And by showing up and being there for them, they were there for me. And service is really the thing that changed this time around. Without service, I don't know how to stay in the program, right? I've always been a very giving person, somebody that always wanted to help. And doing that through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the program that I'm in, just gives so much joy to me, and it helps me on a daily basis. When I have when I have a newcomer reach out to me, or I reach out to a newcomer, the the strength that it gives me to keep going another day to help another person. That's honestly, it's what it's all about. The primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to help the alcoholic that's still suffering, and we give away this gift so that we can keep it. Um, Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. uh, Yeah, I think that's it, Lauren. I mean, I'm of service in every way that I can be. Sometimes I spread myself a little thin, but it's never not worth it. It's never not worth it.
Well, thank you. Can I ask you, I'm gonna ask you a few questions. If there's any you don't want to answer, just be like, I'm not answering it, and you can give me shit later.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna show you some love and then let everybody else unmute and show you some love. Knowing what you know today, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, I don't think that bitch would listen to me. Um,
Good answer.
um, if I could tell her anything, I would tell her, I would show her exactly how it's going to end up. And I bet you she would not believe me and she wouldn't change anything. I'm grateful that my kids are a little bit older and got to see me go through what I went through, because I know that they've seen that, and they'll make better decisions, or at least they'll, you know, have better informed decisions because they saw the hot mess that their mama was. And when I ask them about it, I'll say to them, what was mama like when she was drinking? And they'd be like, oh, it was bad. And I was like, was I fun? And they're like, yeah, sometimes, like, because I would do wild and crazy things, right? So sometimes it was fun, but a lot of times it wasn't fun.
No, I wasn't a fun crackhead. What would you say was your biggest like victory moment in recovery? So, or like that moment where you're just like, wow, like this is just also worth it.
My kid's coming home. That day when like I had been praying so hard about not wanting to have to take legal action to get my kids back. I mean, I could have gotten all self-righteous. I've gotten over a year sober, and how dare you? And I just didn't want to have to do the next thing. And truly feel that was God speaking to me through my son. You know, I heard that daddy can't say no if you ask for us. Like he was whispering it to me like it was a secret, because it seemed like it was a secret. And I texted him, and them coming home, that was my biggest victory in sobriety, because, yes, I do this for myself, but of course I do it for my children too.
For sure. I mean, we know how much it affects our families and, especially our kids. And, a lot of us have been through that. How do you like handle like triggers or like, moments of like temptation? Like what's kind of do you have like a plan, like your go-to if you're in a situation?
So, fortunately for me, the obsession was lifted in that first 100 days sometime. I can't pinpoint it. I can't tell you what day it was, but at some point it just wasn't there anymore. I go through lots of hard shit, and a drink never enters my mind. I stay in the middle of the program. Um, you never hear somebody say, I talked to my sponsor today, I went to a meeting, I read the daily reflection, and then I don't know, at night I just relapsed. I've never heard that story. If someone else has heard it, I mean, I've never heard it. So I stay in the middle. I stay connected. Um, if I start to drift from the program, I think that's when I would be in danger of feeling triggered and, heading towards a relapse. But there's women in my meeting that I go to, my home group meeting, that, have 20, 30 years of sobriety. And it's because they go to that meeting every single week. They go to other meetings every single week. They haven't been sober for 26 years. They've been in the program for 26 years on a daily basis. Dez's little uh, poster that she made of me, I put on there, rent is due on sobriety every day. because that's the way this works. You can't put recovery on the back burner. It's got to be at the top of the list. I've got recovery right here with my higher power, and then everything else. It's the forefront of my life because without it, nothing else exists. So I don't feel triggered to pick up a drink ever, and I feel it's because I stay in the middle of the program.
For sure, definitely staying connected is for me like in different ways, but staying connected definitely like on a daily is what helps. Two quick last questions. What advice would you offer someone struggling with like addiction wants to get sober? What would you tell them?
Um, I would tell them that, it's worth it to give yourself a shot, to really lean into it and just try it. If you've never tried to fully immerse yourself in recovery, just give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It's not for you and you go back to using, but you got
Yeah,
to do
for
all the
sure.
things. You can't be half in, half out. You got to fully commit yourself to it. Just give it a shot, see what happens.
For sure, for sure. All right, the last one you may have answered this a minute ago, but what's your favorite cliche in recovery or saying?
Oh. um, I mean, it's one day at a time, right? Because that's literally the only way that we can do this thing. And all the cliches are true. They're all stupid. They all sound stupid, but they're all fucking true. So how can they be that dumb?
You are
One day
very
at a
right.
time, keep it simple,
Yeah,
let go and let God. That's something that I've learned in sobriety is patience. I never had patience in my life. Even as of course, as a child, I had no patience, and as an adult, I had no patience. Patience is something I've grown in sobriety. The idea that I could pray on something and not have to make a decision right away was a novel idea. You know, I wanted to solve everything when it happened and to have the ability to not know the answer and not know the best thing to do and to wait for the answer to come to me, that's the biggest gift of sobriety,
I
other than
like
my
that. I
wisdom.
love that. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now.